Okay, so now we're actually going to do the particle sim itself. And the easiest way to set that up is we type pop network. Now, pop network doesn't really make a pop network. It doesn't exist anymore. It makes a dot network that has a basic particle setup in it. Now, I just want to say real quick, we're not going to do crazy extensive particle stuff, but again, if you have no familiarity with them, go watch Particles 1, another free Apply to Houdini lesson that will tell you everything you need to know about what we're about to do now. And again, most of it's front-loaded at the beginning of the lesson, so it should be over with quickly. Otherwise, let's just keep going. I'm going to hook this into here. And here's our particle sim. If we press play, it looks like there's a particle sim, but it's not. These blue things are a visualization on, it's a guide from this. So it's actually not bringing any particles in. Change emission type from scatter on surfaces, which of course we have none. We made the points. Just choose all points. All points now brings them in. And there they are. So that's something. So it works. Let's make a pop color, because visualizers are kind of harder to use in the sim here. So I'm just going to use a pop color and say, do a ramp, and then again choose infrared here. And now we can get, well, we have something. It's trying to do the color by age again. N age means how old are you divided by how long are you allowed to live. If we go back to our source here under birth, it's allowed to live 100 seconds. We don't want that. Say you're only allowed to live 1 second. Plus or minus a half of a second. So now it looks like this. So now the points will have randomized times they're allowed to live and die. But now you can see we've got something going on here. We can start to see the particles pouring down, and it's starting to look like something is maybe cool here. So that's nice. Let's also say that these particles, when they are born, should not maybe go the full speed. Let's have them trying to trail off a little bit at 0.75. So they'll have 0.75 as much velocity. And in fact, we can also say add to inherited velocity. Let's have it just vary a little bit more. So I'm typing 0.01. Let's get a plus or minus a little bit of velocity so they spread out a little bit too as they go. So they're not following in a straight line necessarily, but just a little bit. We don't want it to turn into a noise. You know, I mean, the higher we make these, if we put like a whole bunch of variance, it just turns into a noise like this. We don't want that. So just a little bit of variance on it. So that's that. There's no gravity, so we need that. So I'll say gravity, and there you go. And now we'll go. I mean, we might have seen that these were going down before, but that's because the pieces were going down in the rigid sim. The rigid sim had gravity, so they were getting spawned going down. But now we have a real gravity. Let's give it a ground plane to bounce against. We'll, of course, talk about doing a collision with the building soon. Just not quite yet. Let's just get the general idea up and running. So there you go. Now they're hitting the ground. They're bouncing. They're bouncing like crazy, though. So let's say, how about no bounce? Just turn it to 0. They'll still move. You can see that they're sliding on the ground. This has a friction of 1, but the particle thing itself has no friction, which is why that's winning. It's like ice, you know, something with less friction moving across a friction thing. The thing with less friction, if it has like no friction, it's still going to glide over it. So let's give it a good deal of friction. I'm going to give it 0.9. So now you can see the particles they move a little bit, but then quickly come to a stop before disappearing. So that's like the broad stroke, really, of most of this. The last thing I would say is, if we look, we can see a lot of this kind of strata, I call this, where it's like repeated stacked lines all over the place. That doesn't look good. That happens when you have, you know, particles are being spawned on one frame, and then they move to the next frame, but then new particles are being spawned, and it's like an assembly line. And so you get that. Two ways to fix that. One is to do substeps on your particle, on your sim itself. Always a good idea to avoid substeps if you can. Just makes it take longer. And if you can fix it some other way, then you might as well. I'm going to solve two problems at once, which is that, and also the fact that there's no air resistance at all to any of this right now. It's kind of just traveling in a vacuum. So make a pop wind. A pop wind will add drag and also add an extra force on top of it. The force is actually what we'll use to break up those things. Now by default at 1, the drag is incredibly high. So it looks like it's underwater. It looks like there was like an explosion, but then it's stuck in molasses or whatever. So that sucks. As usual, change these things in orders of by 10. That's a lot better, but it still feels very slow to me. With drag, you usually need a very little bit because it's applying this drag on every single frame. So it adds up, essentially, or you feel the cumulative effect of it. The 0.01 is probably good. And I want to have some force, some little windiness to break up that strata kind of thing. I can already see it a little bit less because of the drag, but it hasn't been broken up. So let's just put some noise, some noisy force into this. Seems like it's slightly blurring. Let's go to another order of magnitude 10. And now I think we're there. So now that area that I kept looking at over there, I don't see it. I mean, I don't see it anywhere anymore. The question becomes, is it too much force? I don't think so. It seems fine. I still get pretty defined shapes all over the place. I mean, we won't really know until we maybe run the smoke sim, but it looks pretty good. That's what's nice about having these visualizers, by the way. It helps you to kind of identify specific features. If I had the color off, it would look like this, and it's really hard to see anything here. It's just a white wash. So having the color in allows us to identify stuff like all this hotter area is the stuff that, you know, exploded out first. So it reads separately than the cooler stuff that had just been born. So in any case, so 10 seems to have done the trick for us here. Maybe I'll rough it up a little bit more too. The roughness will be kind of like not literally randomization, but it makes the actual noise itself be not as like a smooth transition. So you get a feel of a little bit more of a randomized particle behavior. So this feels nice to me. I'm gonna go ahead and run. Well, actually, let's bring it back into the world first. So currently, we're getting the particles and the ground plane. See it down here? Because we're back in SOPs. So just do star pop star. What that's doing is it's saying, bring in, there are two dynamics objects in here. There's pop object and the ground plane. This one is called pop object. So you can either put star pop to get it. You can literally type pop object. So there you go. So there, now we're only getting that and not the ground plane. So that's cool. I'm going to say, let us make a quick flipbook. I'm going to show all objects on with our building, and let's see what that looks like. It'll be, again, easier to judge what we have so far by having the building itself, you know, block out some of the internal particles that are still being created. So let's see what this looks like. All right, so that's done. And there you go. Kind of interesting. I mean, honestly, you know, it's not colliding with the building, but it's almost kind of hard to tell. We're going to collide against the building anyway because it'll feel even better. The main part I can feel it not colliding is, see all these particles here coming through the wall? Like so? That's obviously no good. But you really can get away with it not colliding with the building for most of it, to be honest with you. If you just manually deleted these points, yeah. Anyway, we're going to do it the right way, and we'll collide with the building. But that's what it looks like so far. It's already looking pretty cool. And again, we're going to render these points, but we're also going to use them as a source to do the smoke. Now let's cache this. I'm going to put a, let's go, actually, instead of making the file cache over again, let's just copy an existing one, paste it here, and then we'll rename it because we know the file path is in terms of the name. So I'll just say file cache particles, like so. There's really nothing to change otherwise. So I'm going to run that. All right, so obviously that works. Let's put a null here because again we're going to use this to source into our smoke later. So I'll just say particles. Oops, particles, like so. And I'm gonna actually put that attribute noise in here. Now that we've got this color, let's say let's multiply the color that we got from the sim. Because remember, this color is not a visualizer color. This is a color that literally got made by that pop color. It created the CD color attribute. Let's multiply that color by a one-dimensional value. And that will be based off of the rest. Remember that whole thing? I'm going to remap the noise to go from 0 to 1. And let's see what that looks like. So again, you can see the noise pattern kind of traveling in it. So we can, later on when we render it, we can vary up the colors of the particles depending on where they came from. So it can just it'll just break up the appearance of it a little bit. I mean, that's way too big, but something like more like this perhaps. Let's see. Yeah. So something like that. So just thinking ahead to what we're gonna be doing. Nice. But for now, don't need it. Wonderful. So on to actually colliding it with the building itself.